Hello, and welcome to Cutoff Genes, the podcast that teaches you how to find your truth using nothing but DNA. I'm Julie Dixon Jackson, and I'm a genetic genealogist, henceforth known as a Gen Genie.
And I'm Richard Castle, and I'm the producer, and I'm back
He's
as
back!
co-host this week,
Woo.
as if you didn't get enough of me last week already.
I think it was fun.
And those rumors about Renee's demise are not true. I did not. She's not stuffed in my closet with.
She is alive and well and on the continent. That's as much as I can tell you.
I did tell her I was going to watch All About Eve though, and
Yes.
do an Eve Carrington. It's another movie reference, people.
It's another one. Get used to it. I already am going to have to explain last week's movie references, by the way.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
Is that your corrections?
Yeah. Well, I have. Yeah. Corrections quarter is all about last week.
Oh dear.
Well, as it should be.
Okay.
First one, I'm just going to say two words. Jenny Agutter.
Oh, thank you. That was our Logan's Run woman.
Yes.
And she is still doing movies and things in Britain. Yes.
Yes, she is. In last week's episode of the Epic Odyssey, it was edited in a way, and Rich didn't know this, so I'm just going to tell you. It was edited in a way that it sounds like I'm saying that Kayleen and Heather are my aunts. What they are is my aunt's daughters.
Okay.
And so they're my cousins.
Whoops.
Whatever. Basically that's for the Fisher family, for them to be like, we're not your aunts. What are you talking about? So for the people who were born after 1980, Tippi Hedren is an actress who is in Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. She's also Melanie Griffith's mother. And fun fact, she was a celebrity judge in my very first ever scholarship pageant.
Was she really?
She was.
Oh my God. Did you flip her the bird?
I probably wouldn't have done very well had I done
Probably not.
that. Okay, we digress already, everybody.
Oh, no, wait. You know what? I have my own corrections corner. Last week when I said I was riding side saddle,
Yeah.
I realized that didn't make any sense.
That's why I asked if you were wearing a dress.
Now I get it. What I really meant was I was riding shotgun. But you know what? I didn't. I don't like using shotgun references or anything having to do with guns. That's just my personal preference. But I don't know where side saddle came out of that. Let's let Dr. Freud figure that out.
Okay, I will. No, side saddle is how women used to have to ride a horse because they wore dresses, and it was considered unladylike to straddle a horse.
Yes. Oh, you know what else I want to tell you?
Oh, what else?
Today is 2 years since I adopted my dog, and you might hear Buddy in the background chomping on a special anniversary bone.
Yes, anniversary bone.
As if every day's an anniversary because he gets one every day.
Totally, or at least every Tuesday.
He's always in the room with us when we record.
Always.
Yes, and so you might hear him shake or perhaps bark or maybe even whine. Oh, wait, the whining is me.
We love you, buddy. And on that note, let's talk about some Ancestry stuff.
Please.
This is fun, kind of right up your alley, maybe.
Oh.
Ancestry has teamed up with Spotify, have you seen this? To create playlists based on their users' DNA.
I did not see that.
Anyone who's ever submitted one of Ancestry's at-home DNA tests can link their account to Spotify and be met with a playlist that layers Spotify's own notions of your taste on top of music that is popular or culturally significant from your ancestral homes.
Oh, dear.
Now, that's a little misleading because that just sounds to me like they get your ethnicity estimate themselves and decide, what you need to listen to. You actually have to punch in your ethnicity estimate yourself. So if you don't want anything from Norway, just don't put Norway in there.
Well, then what's the point in it?
I know. It's, I tried it very briefly. I did not recognize any of the artists, so lost interest already. But it's like a lot of world music, I think.
Oh,
I don't know.
I just can imagine, I haven't had my DNA done yet,
right.
But I just imagine it coming back in my Spotify playlist.
Just Broadway.
Just Broadway, or just Barbra Streisand. And be like, what? Wait a minute. This is
what
uncanny.
They saw in your DNA. It seems like Ancestry is doubling down on the whole ethnicity estimate thing once again, which that is only an estimate. And because that's what's getting people to test, apparently. And it's irritating.
Why is it irritating?
Because people are surprised when you contact them. They don't even know that this is something that can be done. And they don't know that they match anybody and what that means.
I see.
So you get a constant reaction to, wait, what? How do you know? Who? Why? And so then...
Because everybody's got a different reason for doing their
Exactly.
DNA. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here's an interesting story. This is from Washington State. A Linwood man tried to use a home DNA test to qualify as a minority business owner. He was denied, and now he's suing.
Oh dear. What minority was he trying to claim?
I will tell you.
Oh.
Ralph Taylor says it doesn't matter what he looks like. That could be your first clue. Having lived most of his life as a white man, the 55-year-old now considers himself to be multiracial based on DNA test results.
Oh my.
He's the owner of an insurance company in Linwood, Washington, and also wants the U.S. Department of Transportation to recognize him as a minority so he can gain more deals providing liability insurance to contractors. So this is another form of
Affirmative action?
Yes, thank you. This is another form of affirmative action, I guess.
Well, or playing the system.
Well, on his case,
Yes.
So he's suing Washington State and the federal government because he was denied minority business certification under a program created more than 2 decades ago to help level the playing field for minority business owners seeking contracts. He provided no evidence that he suffered socially or economically because of race. Now, the reason for that would be this. In 2010, he began identifying himself as multiracial.
He's several Rachels.
From friends. In 2010, he began identifying himself as multiracial after a DNA ancestry test. There's a crow outside. Estimated he was 90% Caucasian, guys.
The crow is also black.
Yes. Well, that's where that comes from. 6% Indigenous American, shish crow, and 4% Sub-Saharan African. So he's 10% not white. But again, it's an estimate.
Right.
So, this crow is so mad at me right now. I think it's my
I think
dad.
you heard you mention Jim Crow.
I didn't mention Jim Crow.
Oh, then never mind.
That was last week.
All I keep thinking of with this guy is Steve Martin's movie The Jerk, where he goes, I was born a poor black child.
Yes.
And that was a joke. And this is a joke to me.
He's, you know what? He's just one of those people that, like you said, is bucking the system.
Yeah.
Is just being a jerk.
Why would you do that?
Because he's cheap and he wants something free.
I know, but it's embarrassing to people, and it's a slap in the face to people.
To actual minorities.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
So...
Since then, Taylor has pursued an unconventional legal path that raises questions about how the government determines who is and who isn't a minority. Should it matter what a person looks like? Should it matter? Should they have to prove that they've suffered discrimination? Can DNA tests prove race or ethnicity? And is Taylor taking advantage of a program by basing his identity on DNA results that some experts consider unreliable? Bingo. So, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I guess that begs the question, like, well, how far back do you go, like in your DNA history or in your ancestry, as to where there might be somebody who was not white, and so therefore you are allowed, or anything,
Well, if he's looks like 4% possibly Sub-Saharan African, which is likely black.
Yeah, but aren't we all from Africa, originally?
Right, but most of us don't have it in our DNA.
Right.
However, once again, 4% does mean it would be very far back.
Yes. Okay. Come on now. I'm
Even
sorry.
if it's real.
I call BS.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. That having been said, I'm interested in the questions that you just posed as far as, how do we determine what is the percentage of, minority in you that you are, or how do you identify yourself? I'm interested in that, but
Me
I
too.
mean, I don't know, 10% for whatever is 4% from that far back.
I would think it would have to be at least 50%.
Yeah.
For it to be reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, it's the old slippery slope argument, which I hate. But in this case, it's true. You give them an inch. I mean, people will take advantage of things that were not designed for them.
I have a friend that got a scholarship to Harvard. I mean, not a full scholarship because he is part American Indian.
Yes.
But I mean, it's such a small part. And when I always call him on it, he claims, well, I drink a lot. And
Oh my God.
I'm also not allergic to poison ivy. I don't react to it. So that's in his DNA.
Is that a Native American thing?
Apparently, this is what he says, and we can look it up. But he says because,
We will.
well, you think about it, Native Americans.
They lived in poison ivy.
Right. and so they were not affected.
I
by
don't
it.
know that that's true.
Or that had made perhaps that they had immunity to
resistance
it.
to it,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
Right.
So I believe that, and perhaps that is a trait that is passed down in our genetics.
Oh, definitely, I
know?
would say. I found an interesting little article at a website called theoccasionalgenealogist.com. The lady's name is Jennifer. She doesn't give her last name, so it's just
Maybe
Jennifer.
she's only occasionally Jennifer.
So it's called the 3 Ps of genetic genealogy.
Okay.
And it's pretty succinct. These are just things we need to think about when we are looking for people based on our DNA and how we approach it and how we approach other people.
Okay.
And, okay. So the first P is, what do you think it might be?
Personality.
Nope. Patience.
Well, that goes along with personality. If you're a patient
If you have a patient personality, which I don't, so
Yeah, I don't
how do
either.
I get by? So it's important in so many ways. Like, for example, if your test, if you have to wait for your test to come back, and that usually takes at least 6 weeks.
Right.
It's even worse or even longer if it's right after a holiday or a sale. Constantly contacting the company when your wait is appropriate long will not get you results faster, by the by. You have to know what to expect, adjust your expectations if necessary. You should only contact the company if you're experiencing an abnormally long wait, especially if you're not receiving any email notifications. That means your email address needs to be registered as belonging to the submitted kit, usually done when you purchased it, but you may need to manually do this.
Okay.
Good to know.
So the first P is patience.
Is patience, right. And she talked about another kind of patience that for her was the most relevant.
Okay.
So she talks about how she had to get an older relative to take a DNA test, and she was reluctant to do it. So she had to go and talk to her. She brought other families members with her and not try to force her into doing it, but just have a conversation with her and just to ease her mind and to get her excited about genealogy. And she said it took an hour, which actually is not very long at all, to get her to finally agree to do it. I have an example of patience that happened this week for me, actually, and it was cute. Was helping a client. I had narrowed down his biological father to, once again, a son of one couple.
Okay.
Because I got DNA matches on both of their sides that fit perfectly. There were 3 sons. Now, geographically and age-wise, which doesn't really mean that much, there was one that stuck out as the most obvious choice.
Okay.
So I decided to reach out to him first. Now, he is an older gentleman. He's in his 70s, late 70s, I think. So I called this gentleman, and I explained to him that I was a genetic genealogist, and I wanted to talk about his family tree. And he immediately said, "Oh, let me get my wife."
Really?
And I was like, no, it's your tree. So he didn't hear me, and so she got on the other line. Now, this is something that you wouldn't necessarily be comfortable with your wife hearing if one was going to say, "We think you have a child you never knew about."
Right.
Especially, I didn't know whether they were married at that point or not, and I still didn't know for sure that it was him. So this lady gets on, and I explained to her, once again, I was like, well, there's no way around this. I'm just going to have to talk to them. Here's the trick. You have to be honest. You cannot lie. Nobody should ever lie. But
tactful.
Yes, but appropriately vague is sometimes necessary. And you want them to kind of have a light bulb moment themselves.
I see.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, you don't want to spring some huge thing on them right away that's going to
Precisely.
shock them and they don't know how to react. You want to kind of,
Which
be gentle about
yes,
it, right?
Right. And also, I didn't want to say, "You have a son."
Yeah.
But I wanted him to realize that he may have a son. So I was talking, so I was talking to them both about it. And then I was up front. I said, "So this client of mine, this is his name. This is when he was born. We know who his mother was, and she was from Rhode Island." And
Oh my God, I'm from Rhode Island. Daddy!
he'd stopped really talking. His wife was chatter. She was so cute. I loved her. And then he said, what was her name? And so I told him her name.
Okay.
And he didn't have a reaction.
All right.
And then he said, where was she from? And I said, I think she was born in Philadelphia. Again, no reaction, but very quiet, talking a little more to his wife. And then at one point he wanted to correct his wife, and he said, no, it's this. And he used the woman's name.
Okay.
That she's talking about, like he had taken note of that name and it stayed with him. So I talked to them. This wife kept me on the phone for about an hour.
Wow.
Because she wanted to talk about everybody in the family. And it was so hilarious and endearing because she was so cute.
Is this where your patience came in?
This is where the patience came in, guys, because I just wanted to get off the phone. And what I wanted to do was kind of put that in his head, which I believe I had done at that point.
Yes.
And walk away and think about it. But I don't know if it ever... With him, it might have kind of had all of a sudden a bingo moment.
Have you heard back yet? Or
I have not.
Okay.
I've not heard back.
We'll have to follow up on this.
Yes, we will. You can pinpoint from exactly what family somebody is from. If you can identify matches to both of their parents that fit into how the matches match them.
I see.
So, but if there is more than one male child or female child, depending on what they're looking for, you're not going to know for sure until somebody takes a DNA test.
Right.
Therein lies the problem. Then you have to somehow convince someone to take a DNA test to prove that they are or aren't.
You seem like the person that can get anybody to take a DNA test.
If anyone can, I can.
Yes.
Since I started doing this more where I'm reaching out to families, it's not as easy as it used to be for me. Maybe it's because they're not talking directly to them.
Yes.
Because I'm an intermediary for them.
Right.
And a couple of people have said, well, why isn't that person calling me? And I tell them they will if you want them to.
Right.
I'm doing this for your comfort.
Exactly.
Just as an intermediary, but if you want them to call you, by all means.
You can sort of take out some of the emotion of it, somebody that might be
a
speaking
little
with
bit.
their birth parent or something for the first time. Yeah.
Precisely. Although it does, and I've spoken about this before, it does affect me more when people have a negative reaction. It's
like a triggering thing,
It's
right?
a trigger.
Yeah.
It's like, because it never happened to me personally. I mean,
Right.
but I understand the rejection thing, the whole second rejection thing.
Yes.
And for me personally, I can't wrap my head around somebody not wanting to embrace
Well,
or
I mean,
at
you're
least,
a very empathetic person, so...
Yeah. Maybe too empathetic.
Maybe, but
yeah.
you know what? You're in the right business because I think you'll see the whole range of human,
Sure.
emotion
Right.
with this. So.
Right.
I think we have 2 more P's.
We do. We have PP.
Is the second one? Let me guess. Psychology, the silent P.
Nope.
No. Oh darn.
It's the one actually that talks to me.
Oh.
Perseverance.
Oh, yes.
We all know why. I think the second P has 2 primary applications, but it is also the P that will get you in trouble, which makes sense because, first of all, I'm not very patient, so that gets me in trouble. And the perseverance gets me in trouble because I'm not patient. And so I persevere.
These P's are very interrelated.
Right. Yes, absolutely. It's like just showing up at a relative's house, saying, hey, take this test is not going to, maybe perseverance to you, but it may take them by complete surprise. And a lot of people are very suspicious about DNA tests and they don't, and they're going to feel pressure. So sometimes be careful with your perseverance.
Is that the third P? Pressure?
Pressure.
Put pressure on people.
Pressure. Maybe we should do Julie's version of the 3 Ps. Pressure, personality, and punctuality. I think we can end this right now.
And
okay.
perfection.
Yes. The 4 Ps. Okay. So learning to use DNA and doing the necessary analysis requires lots of perseverance because it takes time, guys. It takes, even though it's something that very much can be done, very rarely can you just discover it just by looking at someone, even with as close as a second cousin match. You have to do your work and your homework, and you have to cross-check and make sure you've looked at all the options. If you're new to genetic genealogy and surprised how long it takes, then you'll be able to persevere. Well, the way you'll be able to persevere is with planning and organization.
Is that the third P, planning?
Nope.
Oh, darn
There's
it.
a lot of P's.
There's a lot of P's in
Aren't
this.
there?
It's very misleading.
Yes. Yes. Okay. The third one. This is a good one. Politeness.
Oh.
And that goes a long way. That has to do with also with the lovely couple that I talked to last week.
Yes.
It helps to be open and warm and listen to what they have to say to you and let them know that you understand. So if you have hesitant test takers to be, they're not going to change their mind if you're not polite. So you should be polite right from the beginning because you never know when you might need them.
Sure.
And another example I have, and I do this a lot, and this doesn't really have to do with politeness, but it could. You're on your social media, I have a tendency to kind of speak my mind. And I have to step that back a lot.
Well, I love that about you personally.
Well, I do too, but there are people who have different views from me that perhaps don't. And therefore, if they go to my Facebook page after I said, hey, this is my Facebook page, I'm legit,
Right.
then they notice that I'm saying terrible things about a specific person in the public eye that maybe they support.
Right. Well, now we've got two more P's. Polarization and politics.
You know what? It's just all about the P's.
Yeah.
So let's just cut this off right there and say whenever you're doing genetic genealogy, just focus on anything that begins with a P. That end.
Are we taking a break?
Yes, we are.
Good, because I got a P. If you're enjoying Cutoff Genes, please subscribe, rate, and review. Now, back to Julie and me.
Okay, we're back. How you feeling? You okay?
Much better.
I'm so glad.
Yeah, we're going to have to start with the R's. I'm so relieved.
So, the 3 R's of... No, just kidding. Just kidding.
Rejection.
Rerun. Restart. All right. So, I put out a call for questions this week on the Facebook group, and I got a bunch.
I saw that. That's great. I'm so glad that you guys out there are interacting with us because it's feels good to know that people are listening and are interested.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's great.
And there's some great questions.
There were some really great questions. Some questions I have already answered. And I told those people, I said, go back and listen to episode 5.
Well, sure. I mean, we have now, this is episode 22. There's a lot to listen to if somebody's just starting now. They may ask a question that was answered earlier. Sure.
Exactly. Guys, when you direct your friends to the podcast, recommend highly that they start with episode 1. Just because of the learning involved in understanding genetic genealogy, but also the story, you don't want spoilers. I don't know. It's a personal thing. All right. So Ferris Williams said, I'd love to hear more about chromosome mapping. I've been reading a lot up on it. It seems like it has the potential to connect a lot of dots. It does, Ferris. Very good. I've touched on chromosome mapping before, but I haven't gotten very specific, and I want to be a little more succinct about it.
Okay.
And let you know how you can benefit from it. Chromosome mapping is a technique used in autosomal DNA testing which allows the testee to determine which segments of DNA came from which ancestor.
Oh, okay.
In order to map DNA segments on specific chromosomes, it is necessary to test a number of close family relatives, meaning between first and third cousins.
Okay.
If you can.
And if you have them.
And if you have them.
Right.
You eventually will. So in layman's terms, I'm going to break that down even more. By mapping on which chromosome and what position you match a certain line, you can begin to learn which ancestors you inherit that particular chunk of DNA. In theory, you'll eventually be able to identify a new match and how you are connected by where exactly your match, assuming that piece of DNA comes from a parent that is related to your common ancestor. So, can you wrap your head around that?
I'm still rapping, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay, let me give you an example. There are several matches I have that I don't know where we connect and they don't have a tree. However, from the way that they match other people and from what chromosome I match them on, so it's twofold. From matches in common on Ancestry is one way. Then when you get their information, which you can't from Ancestry, but if they happen to be in one of the other sites and you can get them on GEDmatch, that's where you can break down the chromosomes.
Right.
So, for example, I know exactly who is somehow related to my Taylor line, even if I don't know how, because they match in exactly the same place as all of my known relatives that are directly from that line.
I see.
Does that make sense?
It does. I'm thinking in terms of my own family. You know, on my dad's side, he was one of 9 kids, and 8 of them had children. And I just think, oh my God, there's so many cousins, and to try to even like search that down.
Try finding fathers from that group.
Right. Well, you know, on my mom's side, she was an only child, right?
Yes.
So it would be easier on that side, but still, it just that's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people, and it takes a lot of time. I mean, the bottom line is the more people you have to go through, the longer it takes.
Right.
You know.
I mean, I guess then also
Just as in life.
the more complete information you have for your tree and for your mapping, right?
Certainly.
I mean, if that's what your goal is, it depends, I guess, on what you're looking for too, right? I mean,
exactly. Right. I mean, for the I think it was first in genetic genealogy. Chromosome mapping was primarily for people who were looking for parents or family that they didn't know. But now people are using. But then it evolved into, hey, this is a way to actually affirm my DNA research or my genetic genealogy research or my genealogical research. It takes a little patience and perseverance, everybody.
Yes.
So a great way to learn how to map your chromosomes or your relatives' chromosomes is by an app called DNA Painter by Johnny Pearl.
I knew there had to be an app for it.
Of course, there's an app for everything. Yeah, it's fabulous, you guys, and it has other features too that are very helpful that I utilize on a daily basis.
DNA Painter.
DNA Painter, DNApainter.com.
Okay.
And it's free, yo. Who am I that I just said that?
I don't know, but I'm going to check your Ancestry now.
So
you're like a pirate. Yo, ho, ho.
That wasn't what I was going for, but okay. All right. So the DNA Painter is a site with online tools for chromosome mapping and relationship prediction based on shared centimorgans. So those two things, you know how I refer to the green sheet a lot of the times? Like, well, we see how much we match here. I need to look at the green sheet to see what are the probabilities of that.
Yes.
This app does that without you having to pull out the green sheet.
I like that.
Yeah, me too.
Because I don't want to have to pull out the green sheet.
I hate pulling out the green sheet. So prerequisites for using DNA Painter's chromosome mapping include you or someone close to you needs to have taken an autosomal DNA test. Obviously. B, you have access to the segment data for your DNA matches. Most sites now offer this, but if you've tested with Ancestry, it's necessary to transfer your data to another site or vendor in order to be able to access this information. Because as we all know, Ancestry does not have a chromosome browser. Thank you.
Yes. I'm not even a genealogist, and I know that. My goodness.
Yeah. So, guys, as you know, I believe Ancestry is the best for finding relatives and finding for adoptees to find parents. All right. If you don't yet have segment data for your matches, e.g., if you've only tested at Ancestry and haven't transferred your raw data, please read through the What You Need to Get Started page on DNA Painter. And transfer your data before joining the group because it's going to be useless to you until. And I'm going to give you one more to clarify, and I've said this a million times, but it's the most important thing. If you've only tested at Ancestry and have not transferred your results to GEDmatch, Family Tree NA, or MyHeritage, all of those, you guys, you can, and it's free. So that you can get segment data, don't request to join the group. Oh, you know what? I got that from the group. There's a group on Facebook that is just for users of DNA Painter. I forgot to mention that.
Oh, okay.
Which is a great community to go to if you're using it and have questions about it.
I would think so, yes.
Yes, it's great. All right, so that's a little more on chromosome mapping.
It was a good question.
Yeah, it was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ferris.
Thank you, Ferris. All right, let's take a break.
Thank you for listening to Cutoff Genes, the new podcast starring Julie Dixon Jackson with Renee Culver.
It's that time, everybody. It's time for the Epic Odyssey.
Woohoo!
Yay! My daughter told me that that it's incorrectly called an Epic Odyssey because an Odyssey, by definition, is epic.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever.
But we live with hyperbole, so we want to say epic Odyssey.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And my
amazing
daughter is
epic Odyssey.
Yes. Amazing epic Odyssey that goes on forever. My daughter is as pedantic as I am, so whatever. When last we spoke,
Yes.
I was talking about how I was reading the letters that read like diaries that my father had written to his father over the years.
Yes,
and
and
it was
they're
coming
amazing,
up.
yes.
And it was coming up on when I was to be invented. Let's put it that way. The invention of Julie. And then all of a sudden, it was April of 1964, and they stopped. The next letter I got was from October 19th, and he was on a passenger ship to England.
Right, there was this unexplained gap.
A huge unexplained gap, which right in the middle of I would have been conceived, which blew my mind. So that's still a mystery to this day. What happened to that stuff?
Oh, I was hoping this week you'd be able to tell me.
No.
Oh, there's this missing book, and I found it.
Yeah, no,
No.
I wish.
No.
So he wrote several letters, once again, from the journey.
Is this
He did a
the
little
journey?
traveling.
Refresh my memory. Is this the journey where he was going to meet the horse lady?
Yes.
Okay.
The horse lady. Yes.
Frances, the
Frances.
talking mule. That's how I remember.
That's right.
Isn't that ridiculous?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, I believe he had his sights set on Frances.
Yes.
And she was probably flirting with him and didn't realize that he would actually get on a boat and go see her. Because I'll tell you.
Oh.
All right. So the letters were hilarious. He would once again describe life on this boat, on this cruise ship. They would, back then, especially if you were not of the higher class, you would share cabins with complete strangers.
Yeah, I could never do that.
Me neither.
Yeah.
Hello. My parents did that. My parents sailed to Europe on the Queen Mary, and they shared their cabin, their honeymoon cabin, with other people.
Their honeymoon cabin?
I think so.
Oh, wow.
Maybe I'm wrong.
It's no wonder why they had to adopt.
So, he would talk about there were dances and stuff, and he loved to go to dances. He would talk about the people he had dinner with, because you always sit with the same people at the table. You have a
I'm fine with sitting with strangers. I just don't want to sleep with them,
No, me
in
neither.
my room, my cabin.
No. I actually couldn't find this particular letter, but that I wanted to talk about because it made me laugh. But he was described each of his table mates, and one was, he would say a palmy, because that's what Australians call Brits.
Okay.
And the other was, I think, another Australian that was going for work to England. And then a beautiful woman that he called something like a great sort, or a doll, that never talked to anybody or smiled.
Oh.
She ignored everybody at her table and looked miserable. But at another time, he referred to her again in a different letter, and he said something funny had happened in the dining room, and he said even the blonde at the table cracked a smile or something like that. It made me laugh.
Oh, that's sweet.
It was cute. So they went to they would have theme nights on the ship, like a crazy hat night.
They still do this, on cruise ships.
I do know
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yes. I don't participate.
Well, you used to work on a cruise ship, right?
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's once again, it's the whole Disneyland extravaganza.
all right.
If I've worked there, I don't want to go again. So I do like cruises, actually.
I remember when I took a cruise and there was like was it a costume night and
Yeah,
then
there's
there was
always a theme night.
dress up night and and I was like, oh my God, how many clothes do I need to bring on this thing? You know,
lot.
I had to pack a trunk.
Yeah. So, and he also had the letters he sent to his dad, they kept crossing their messages.
One letter
if that
would
makes sense.
arrive before the next one.
Yes, and it didn't, and he'd already said that and blah, blah, blah. But he was always worried about spending all of his money because he's obviously saved up money. So he did the most drinking on the night that the Commodore, who was the captain, invited a certain group of people to a cocktail party, and they got free booze that night. And he got so drunk that they had to cut him off.
Wow, there you go.
And he didn't drink for
Another
days
piece
after
of the
that.
puzzle.
So when he got to England, the next letter was from a boarding house in Exeter, which is where he was, which is in Devon. Mm-hmm. And he had a job driving or conducting on a bus. And then he started talking about Frances. I think he might have surprised her or something.
Oh, dear, that's never good.
Right, because when he got there, he discovered that she was, he said, practically engaged to a soldier, and their imagined relationship was not to be.
Oh,
Wah,
boy.
wah.
Wow, that's a long way to go from
Yeah.
Australia to England to
Wow.
find out. Wow, that's a horse of a different color, Frances.
Yes, I love it. So he wasn't thrilled, but he took it in stride. And
In
he's
stride? Are you trying to say he had a horse in this race?
like, you know what? Let's get over this hurdle. Right. Okay.
All right, folks.
I
Julie
just spit out my water.
Julie just did a spit take all over the desk. She's a true comedian.
I literally did. All right. So he wasn't thrilled, but he took it in stride. Don't start. And he made the best of the situation and stuck around for at least, I think he needed to save up money to get home.
Yeah, he had to get
this
back in
point.
the saddle again.
I will cut you. He talked about his landlady, who he was not impressed with. Mm-hmm. I think she was a tightwad, and she complained when he took long, hot baths or sat by the heater for too long.
Wow.
The stuff about the baths and the heat, and like he was always cold, really spoke to me, because when I was in England, and I've had this thing all my life, whereas I don't know if it's a circulation issue, but my feet are always cold. Always, always, always. And I can't get warm. Even if it's in the middle of summer, if I'm still, my feet start to get cold if I'm sitting in air conditioning. So he talked about that a lot. And when I was last in England, that was like my biggest problem. I was miserable because my feet were constantly cold. So that spoke to me. He actually said that his feet were cold several times. And every time he said it, I was like, oh, that's where I get it.
And he was hoping that Frances had cold feet and therefore would break up with her fiance.
She had cold hoofs.
Cool.
Okay,
Come
what
on,
else? did he
gallop
talk
along
about?
now.
Okay, so he experienced his first almost white Christmas. It wasn't quite. I think it snowed a couple days after, which for an Australian is a big deal because we go to the beach on Christmas in Australia. Everybody, it's in the southern hemisphere. So he thought the Pommies, at least the ones in Exeter, were a little too set in their ways and generally backwards, which means he had a little progressive thinking, which spoke to me. So he finally moved into a new boarding house because he didn't like the uptight landlady. Gosh, he stayed in those two boarding houses, and then all of a sudden I got a letter and he was in London.
Okay.
I don't know how we got to London, but what's great about these letters is that he would have, they would have mailing addresses on them. So I could go to Google Earth once again and look at these places that he actually lived.
Are they still there?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, most of them are. Mm-hmm. Unless you can tell if they're like a new building,
Sure.
a relatively new building since the mid-'60s. But like the one where he stayed in London is a hotel now. It was a boarding house then, but
Right. Yeah.
it's still there. In fact, my daughter is in London as we speak, and I'm going to start sending her addresses to go to.
Oh, that's exciting, though.
And knock on the door and say, "Hey, are you my uncle?"
Yeah. No.
Too much?
Yeah, no.
okay.
You got to have patience and what is it? Persistence.
And politeness.
Yes, you
it's
have to
not
be polite,
polite to knock
yes.
on somebody's door
No.
and ask if you're related to them.
Yeah.
All right.
Or don't look in windows and then you have that other peeping Tom.
All right. So he spent the remainder of his time there in London. I guess taking odd jobs and going to dances. He would talk once again about girls he went out with and people that he met. And he'd talk about the bands that he saw.
Well, how old was he at this point?
Oh, it was 1960. Well, now it was 1965. So he was born in 1939.
Oh, so he was a young guy. He was
Yeah.
26 years old. Yeah.
Yeah.
See how I did that?
Very good.
I know.
Math.
I know. I looked at
We
you.
all know I don't
you
do
had
that.
you had this blank expression, and I'm like,
was
okay,
glazed
I
over.
gotta go in there with the math.
So then, around, I guess, March, all of a sudden, he was on another boat heading back to Australia. The boat arrived in Sydney, and he had to get from Sydney to Melbourne, and he wrote his father from Sydney and said, I just got off the boat, and I looked at the date, and it was April 7th, 1965, the day I was born.
Oh, that's so cool.
Isn't that weird?
It's great, though. It's
Yeah.
great, like, to think about the day you were born.
My father came back into Australia
Yeah.
and had no idea about me, obviously.
Right. If we had the rights
Yes.
to the music, I would be playing in the background Police's song Synchronicity. Remember Synchronicity?
Yes.
Synchronicity 2? Yeah.
I love that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, I'm going to leave that there. And so he'd come back into the country. He didn't really say why. He said he was staying at a place called the People's Palace, which I looked up and saw that was a place that every major city had that poor people could stay in. So it was kind of, once again, like a boarding house.
Yes.
But the People's Palace, it was actually called the People's Palace. And my father talked about it a lot.
Yet 2 more P's. People's Palace. This is the
This
P
is
episode.
the P episode. Oh, boy. Okay, I'm going to leave that there.
We
There's
just found a title for this podcast.
P episode.
Another P.
Hey, let's end there. Rich, we're
Yes.
done. Tell people about yourself.
Oh, do they really want to know?
I think maybe not, but do it anyway.
I am Richard Castle. I am not only the producer of this podcast, but I am a musician and songwriter and writer of the musical theater. I have a website, richardcastle.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at Castle Songs.
Yay! I am Julie Dixon Jackson at Jules Jackson with 2 O's on the Twitter. The podcast on Twitter is at Cutoff Jeans Pod. We have a Facebook group called the Cutoff Jeans Podcast. You can email me directly at julesjackson@cutoffjeans.com. And there you
Sounds
have
great.
it.
Do you have something else to say, Julie, that doesn't have a P related?
I do. There are no P's in what I have to say. Hey, everybody, the truth is in your jeans.